Hello, and welcome to my review of episode 5 of Planet Earth, which is about deserts. So the first major bit of footage we get in this episode is about back-trained camels. So up until this point, back-trained camels weren't filmed very often. I don't think they'd been filmed at all, to be honest. I think people kind of knew them more from zoos and safari parks, to be honest. It was really interesting seeing them in their natural habitat. The Gobi Desert is a weird one to start with. It's cold for one thing, there's snow there pretty much all year round. We see the camels having to rely on the snow to survive. We get a lot of weird behaviour from them. Again, it was the first time they'd filmed anything. They didn't really go in with the intention to film anything. In particular, I don't think. It was just showing you camels. But seeing them, their weird kind of mating behaviour, all that stuff was really interesting. It's a really good way of opening the episode, I think. So after that, we kind of move from the coldest desert to the hottest desert. We see the Sahara. We talk about how it's the largest desert in the world and how there's loads of sand dunes. After that, we see red kangaroos. So red kangaroos, weirdly, are an animal that I don't think we see very often. When we do see kangaroos in these programmes, they tend to be grey kangaroos. Aside from Life of Mammals, I can't think of a series apart from Planet Earth that really deals with red kangaroos in any way. But red kangaroos are a very good species to talk about with regards to adaptations to the desert. And that's basically what the sequence is all about. And we see various things the kangaroos do. They have to lick themselves to keep their skin moist, to cool themselves down. They dig through the sand to reach the colder layers. And obviously they have to stay in the shade. I also like the music. The music in this episode and the series as a whole was pretty good. Planet Earth, the score for Planet Earth is pretty underrated. But I think the fact that we hear little didgeridoos in the background is a very good indicator to show us where we are. It was kind of like what I said with the freshwater episode, how the instruments were kind of very reminiscent of the place that they were filmed. I think that was pretty good here. Then we see fennec foxes. Again, this sequence is all about showing you how most animals that live in the deserts are nocturnal. We talk about fennec foxes, we see toads, we see scorpions, we see a variety of animals. And the fennec foxes, I think, here are quite young, so they're particularly cute just for the audiences. So that was a good sequence as well, I think. Then we go to the driest desert in the world, which is the Atacama Desert, which weirdly is not devoid of life. We talk about guanaco here, so they're an animal we see kind of pop up every now and again. They did pop up in the mountains episode being hunted by puma, and that's the sort of sequence where we usually see them. But it was really interesting here seeing them how they feed on cactuses, and how Attenborough says that, well, the fact that there's cactus here just creates further questions, which it does. And we see that this fog comes in from the sea, because the Atacama, despite being so dry, isn't actually that far from the ocean. And obviously there's moisture in the fog, and that's basically what enables this ecosystem to actually exist. Like, without that, there wouldn't be any guanaco, there wouldn't be any cactus, there wouldn't be any of the birds that feed on them. Again, the Atacama is the most bleak desert in the world, and I think it does a really good job of showing you that even here life exists. After that, we look at the saguaro cactus in North America. So cacti in general, and particularly the saguaro cactus, is probably the most famous desert plant, I think, unless you're counting tumbleweed. It definitely is. So we do spend quite a lot of time there. We just talk about cactus and a lot of things about them, how they're able to survive in the desert, how they're pollinated by bats. I feel like a lot of people didn't know that. And then we see other parts of North America. We see how the desert shapes these rocks into these amazing formations that we see. It's really cool. I mean, these things, I like looking at these things. Again, the American desert is just a pretty iconic thing. There's a reason that the whole genre of films were made in the West back in the 50s. And then we see Nubian Ibex. So Nubian Ibex are an animal that appears in pretty much every desert episode. It appeared in Planet Earth 2. They've appeared in various things, Life. I think most series that have some sort of desert sequence seem to feature them. And usually they're not the highlight. But this episode, I quite like them. I think this was the first time we see them. And I think this is maybe why we saw them a lot after. They were just fighting, basically. Again, we don't see a lot of large herbivores in desert environments. And I think for this episode, they probably did struggle to have large sort of, magnificent animals like, the mountains episode of the snow leopards and stuff like that. Freshwater had stuff like otters and crocodiles and everything. The caves just had, the caves themselves. Here, it's not as easy to find stars. And the Ibex kind of weirdly fell into that category, I think. We basically see them fighting, and it's pretty cool. Again, I feel like most of the time we see Ibex, they're being chased by something. To see them actually fighting on these sheer rock faces is quite cool. In a weird way, it's kind of unique. I feel like it would be an obvious sort of footage to film, but a lot of the time they don't seem to go there, I think. So it was kind of cool to see here. Then we get flat lizards. So the flat lizards in South Africa, they talk about how it's the biggest concentration of lizards anywhere in the world, and it probably is. And it's just when they're hunting these black flies, they basically have to jump for them. And it's quite funny, again, the music helps. Then we go to Namibia. So we spend quite a lot of time in the Namib Desert, which is the oldest desert in the world, which they don't talk about here, I don't think. Basically see some various iconic animals that we see in other environments like elephants and lions, namely. The elephants, it's mostly just the elephants wandering around the desert. We talk about how they don't drink as much as elephants elsewhere because there's not much water. They have to kind of make do. And I think it's quite cool. The lions were pretty good. The lions hunting the oryx is quite good. So it's not like an epic hunt like the lions in Planet Earth 2 with them hunting the giraffes. Instead, it's a bit more of a waiting game. We see them just kind of following them onto the dunes, and the oryx are just not playing ball. They're just off the dune. They're running off. And the lions are kind of stuck there on the rocks, waiting for them to come to them. I think the shot where it just zooms out of the oryx and it shows the dune, and again, the music is amazing there. It's a really epic score. It's very effective at just showing you how little life actually exists in these locations. And when the rains come, there's a lot of water, and these animals are able to flourish. The elephants have got some water. The oryx have some water. The lions have some oryx, which is always good for them. That whole combination of sequences did a really good job of showing you that animals that are, big animals that we see elsewhere, pretty iconic animals, can exist in the desert, but they have to change their lives quite significantly to fit in there. It's really cool. It kind of feels like, in a weird way, how a post-apocalyptic kind of world would exist, how people, we all live in our towns and our cities, we have pretty easy lives, but if we were put in this really harsh environment where we would have very little resources, we'd really have to dramatically change things. It was just a parallel I kind of drew from it. I think it was just a really interesting sequence. It may have been one of the best parts of the episode as well. And then we get the locusts. So the locusts are pretty iconic. We saw them in Planet Earth 2. I think the sequence in Planet Earth 2 did a better job at showing you how much of a plague these locusts are. But this is ultimately the sequence that series was paying homage to. And it's great. I mean, just seeing the locusts going through their life stages. I think we get a more in-depth look in this series. Again, it shows you how far these locusts travel for food. They're basically constantly on the wing, just flying with the wind, and they meet all these other swarms, and they form these vast plagues. And they do talk about how this isn't like a common occurrence. This really doesn't appear very often. But again, I think, as I said in my Planet Earth 2 review, it does paint a very good picture of how, these swarms, these mass plagues would have been seen as like a death sentence to a lot of people. You can see how they've, you could see how they're in the Bible anyway. And that's kind of how the episode ends. Then the diaries is all about the people filming the back-trained camels. And it's really good. Again, I forget how much I like the diaries in these series. You can really see how much of a farce the whole thing was, like them getting through security. There's guys just, the joke about building the engine out of nothing. It's quite funny. There's one guy just punched their interpreter in the face after starting a fight with one of the park guides. Great stuff. And they all just kind of go over it the next day. It seemed fun. Even them eating the food was pretty rank, like they're eating frozen pilchards for breakfast isn't exactly my idea of a fry-up, so not sure I'd be partaking in that either. And then filming the camels was really cool as well, because the camels are miles away. The camels spot them a mile off, they're not hanging about. So it took them a long time to get the footage. I think it was like a month or something. And you can see the frustrations that they have. And again, really good stuff. I very much enjoyed that. This episode is quite good. It's not as good as the mountains episode or the caves episode, but it's still pretty good. There's some stuff in there. Again, some unique stuff in there. The highlights for probably the camels and the stuff in the Namib desert. The Ibex were also pretty cool. The locusts at the end is really good as well. So yeah, this episode is still pretty good. It's pretty good. So yeah, what did you think of the episode? What were your highlights? And as ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, but also don't feel like you need to. I will be doing the Ice Worlds episode next, so very different habitat. I might even wear a dressing gown or a hat, who knows. I'll see you then, and goodbye.